Oh, hello, greetings, heroes. It is I, your friendly neighborhood Rabbi John Carrier, and this is a first for me doing a live streaming of a Parashat Hashavua lesson. It's a Torah portion of the week lesson, and this week we're going to talk about Parashat Tetzaveh. Tetzaveh is a parsha in Sefer Shmot, or the book of Exodus. And before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to any people watching this. Fixing my audio, still getting used to the live thing, gang. Let's say who's out there. Carla Jenkins is there. Hi, Carla. How are you? Sorry, I used last names. I'll try to stop doing that. Really happy to see my friends here joining me from all over. Where are you coming from? We got greetings from Germany. Where are people coming from today? We got Whitney here from. Let's see. I forget where people are from. I know where Whitney's from, but I'll let Whitney say it. All right. Really happy to see everybody joining me here today. Some familiar faces. Hope to see some new folks as well. Don't be shy, new folks. My friends are friendly. That's why they're my friends. So feel free to share who you are, say hello, where you're coming in from. In just a second, we're going to talk about Parashat Tetzaveh, which once again is a parsha that's in the book of Shmot or Exodus, and it's dealing primarily with priestly clothing and priestly behavior, like how Aaron and his sons and his descendants are supposed to act in holy service. And first we talk about how they dress, and then we talk about how they work. But it starts with a very unique mitzvah, let's say, and that unique mitzvah informs us a great deal both about Jewish continuity and the continuity and continuous nature of revelation in the Torah. And so we're going to focus on that today. I'm going to let everybody else talk about clothes. I call this Parsha Fashion Week. If last week's Parsha, Truma, it was kind of like Property Brothers, I think, because it's talking about all construction materials. This week I think of as Project Runway, which is a big draw for my daughters and other members of my family. So we've moved from Property Brothers to Project Runway. Real quick, want to throw this out there. I've got stuff up on the screen. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this, this will be absolutely useless for you. But if you're watching this, just wanted to show you some other ways that you can connect with me and learn with me and some of my friends. The first is you are invited to listen to the Jew Curious Show podcast. This is a podcast that's available on iTunes. Just go to iTunes and look for Jew Curious Show, and you'll find that. It's on other platforms as well. You do you. I prefer iTunes. I get no money from the Apple people on this one, but that's just one of the biggest platforms out there, so I want to make sure it's there. And it's also, I think, in Stitcher and Google Play and places like that. Come listen. I just booked some really solid guests for the upcoming season. We've been kind of quiet for a little while, but coming up just this week alone, I am interviewing one of my greatest mentors and teachers, author Rabbi Brad Hirschfield. And then later on in the week, we're talking to Professor Jack Wertheimer of the Jewish Theological Seminary, who just wrote a great book called, I believe, The New American Judaism, or The New Judaism in America. I really better get that straight before the interview. I actually just started reading this book, and it's fantastic. I also have to finish that before we talk. So right after this, I'm going to go do some Jewish speed reading, if you will. So got those guests coming up, a bunch more. And we're going to include in the mix some not interview shows. Like I may throw this Parsha discussion in there as well for the benefit of people who prefer to learn orally. What's the word? Anyway, earbud wise, going to put some other things in there as well. And so keep your ears peeled for new episodes of the Jew Curious Show. Another great way we can get connected is I've got a free guide for people. I call it the 3 Things Guide for short. It's 3 things that Jew Curious people need in order to upgrade your Jewish learning experience. There is a link to that in the show notes, and just find out about that. These are things that I found profoundly helpful in my 19 going on 20 some years of Jewish study. So these are things that I hope can clear some roadblocks out of the way for you. Another way to get connected is I've got a book out there called The Promised Life, where I take the 7 gifts of the Jewish tradition. I say these are 7 mitzvot, or 7 Jewish traditions or practices that have had a profound effect on my life. And I share some personal stories of my own background, my very long and twisty, topsy-turvy religious, spiritual journey in there. So you can check that out. You don't have to buy it. It's on Amazon. If you want to get on the library, BitTorrent, you do you. But borrow it from a friend or even a frenemy. However you want to read it, it's there for you if you are a book person. And finally, I want to make sure you know about, if you're joining me for the first time, I want to make sure you know about the Jew Curious School, which is a fantastic community of learning that me and about 3 dozen of my friends so far have put together as a way to get connected live 2-3 times a week to do some serious learning of the weekly Torah portion of some topic that students are interested in, as well as a full introduction to Judaism curriculum. But what I like more, and I'm a teacher, I like teaching classes, but what I like even more than the classes is the community that has formed there. I put out, kind of a forum space, just hoping that people would talk to each other. And I have been absolutely blown away by how people interact with one another, support one another, share the truth of their own journey, but also support people who are having, again, hitting roadblocks and potholes in their journey, or just need some advice or information. I'm in the forums all the time, but what I love the most is when somebody posts a question, and before I can even type an answer, 3 other people have typed an answer, and I'll put in my 2 cents as well. But that's my favorite thing about the Jew Curious School, absolutely, is the community of people who are at different points in their journey, but are committed to learning and supporting each other. So feel free to check that out. These will be flashing on your screen if you're watching this, if you want to take a look at them later. For right now, I want to jump into today's topic, which is Parashat Tetzaveh. Before we do, it's my practice to say the blessing over Torah learning. And so I'm going to say this blessing in Hebrew. Just what it means is we bless God, who's the sovereign of the universe, who makes our lives special, sets our lives apart, makes them special with mitzvot, including the mitzvah, the commandment, the gift of Torah study. And it goes something like this. And after you hear it, feel free to say Amen, or type Amen in the chat. If you want to do it that way, that's okay with me. And it goes like this: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. All right, let's do this. So before I tell you that story, I want to tell you this story. So this is a story. You may have heard this story from me before. If you haven't heard this story from me before, we haven't known each other for more than 3 weeks. So I love it, because this is perhaps my favorite story from the Hasidic tradition, and it's about Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk. And Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk was sort of a notoriously stern teacher, let's say. He did not suffer fools willingly or lightly. And he was sort of famously, just a great humble soul, but a real curmudgeon. Spent most of his final years in one single room, burned all of his manuscripts before he died so that, he wouldn't become like a famous author or something. And we know of him through stories told by his students, as is similar with many other Hasidic masters like Rabbi Menachem Mendel. But this is the one that speaks the most to me. I'll say, as a parent, that's a big part of who I am. Is I'm the parent of 4 children, ages 6 to 23, I think is the number now, 6 to 23, and a couple there in between. But this story speaks to my heart, especially as a father and as a teacher. And the story goes like this. This guy, just sort of a regular, stam yid, regular village person, not village people, but like village person, comes to Rabbi Menachem Mendel and says, Rabbi Menachem Mendel, I have this problem. I keep telling my son to learn Torah, but no matter how much I tell my son to learn Torah, he will not crack a book. He will not go to the study hall. He will, no matter what I say, no matter what I tell him to do, no matter how I threaten him or try to bribe him, he will not begin studying Torah. And Rabbi Menachem Mendel looks at him. There may have been corporal punishment involved, like I heard maybe a little box on the ear or something, or at least a dirty look. So Rabbi Menachem Mendel looks at him and says, Here's the problem. What you've done is you have told your son to study Torah, but you have not actually studied Torah, right? He hasn't seen you do it. You've only told him that it's an important thing for him to do. And so what's going to happen next is he's not going to study anything, first of all. But when he grows up and has a son of his own, he's going to tell his son to study Torah. And then that son is going to tell his son to study Torah. And then generations down the line, you will have accomplished as a family 0 Torah study. But you will have this great family tradition of badgering people to little effect. Like that's your legacy. So if you want your to study Torah, the best thing you can do is study Torah. Right? If you sit down and you study and your son sees what it does for you, whether it makes you puzzled, whether it brings joy to your life, just the fact that you're engaged in it in a meaningful way, then he's going to do it, right? And then when he does it, his son is going to see him and he's going to do it. And so that way you will have a legacy of study and scholarship and a better life that comes with that. Right? So you have to lead by example. And I don't know if Rabbi Menachem Mendel probably didn't speak English, so he might not have said lead by example, but you get the point, right? If you want someone to have a better life, you need to emulate that life, or you need to model that life for them to emulate, and that's how the legacy pays forward. So what's interesting about this parsha, unlike other parshiot, is I'm just going to check the chat. It was before I finish that sentence, I want to see where people are coming in from. We got Florida, we got Albany, New York, we've got some Amains, we've got a lead by example in here. People are listening when I talk. I love it when that happens. It also means the audio is working. Thank you guys for playing around with me for a little bit for these live streams. It's taken a little bit to get it off the ground, but I think it's working a little better now. Where was I? Mid-sentence. Okay. A couple of unique things about this parsha. First off, this parsha is unique in that Moses' name doesn't appear in it. It's like one of the few parsha. It's like between between at least Shemot and Devarim. For Shemot, Vayikra, and Bamidbar, or Genesis, Leviticus, and Numbers, every parsha has Moses' name in it. This one doesn't. Right? It has God referring to Moses with a pronoun like you, say, hey, you, do this. And we know God's probably talking to Moses. But Moses' name doesn't appear. It's a little bit like the holiday that we've got coming up, Purim, where no name for God appears in Megillat Esther, right? And so people have concluded that some people have concluded that God isn't present in that story at all, but probably a deeper and more sensitive tradition is that God is present in the story of Esther and in the story of Purim, but God is working through the characters of people who are inspired by God, right? God is hidden. There's a sort of this idea of hester panim, or hiding the face. God is hidden and working through the actions of human beings. In this parsha, Moses is hidden. Right, he's secluded, and so maybe people are inspired by Moses, or people have heard Moses' tradition and are passing it on, but Moses isn't the one mentioned by name. Some people say this is his chance to kind of pull back and get the spotlight on his brother, Aaron, who's got a big job to do. This whole parsha is about preparing the priests for the work of helping the people connect to God through the holy temple service. Right, and so it's fitting for for Aaron to take center stage, and Moses knows for this to happen, because Moses has been kind of in people's face for a little while now. Moses has to step back, right? And one thing, even though he's loud, he gets angry sometimes. One thing that Moses is known for is his humility as a leader, right? He's always wanted to pull back. He's wanted to step back, let other people take control of their situation. You didn't maybe come by this, maybe this was his character, but he didn't know that he could do this in management, say, until Parashat Yitro, where his father-in-law Yitro says to him, look, you're judging all these people's cases, but you're going to wear yourself out, and you're going to wear them out waiting for you, so why don't you learn how to delegate, yo? And those are my words. I don't know if Yitro said yo. But that's when Moses learned to, step back in action and leadership, but it was always sort of his nature to step back and not take the spotlight. He didn't even want to be Moses, first off. Like, he did not want this job until the burning bush made a very compelling argument. So in this parsha, he pulls back, and God doesn't refer to him by name, but says Ata. And I just want to read the first verse to you. I'm going to read this. I don't have it memorized. Sorry, Baptists. But I say that. I got a lot of Baptist family. I can make fun of my own people. V'ta tetzaveh et bnei Yisrael v'yikahu alecha shemen zait zach katit. Right, that's a lot of words for olive oil. Agag. Sorry about that. V'ta tetzaveh, you command et bnei Yisrael, the people Israel, the progeny of Jacob, v'yikahu alecha shemen zait katit, or shemen zait zach katit, acquire for yourselves olive oil that is clear and beaten, right? Or the clear oil of beaten olives, right? So they pick the olives off the tree, put them in a mortar and beat them, and it makes until the olive oil runs clear. This is the most refined form of olive oil that is terribly useful in lighting lamps. Oh, spoiler alert, lama or lahalot ner tamid. So in order to illuminate these lamps that we just finished commanding you to put up continuously, right? You shall, and easier, simple translation is, you shall further instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling lamps regularly. That's translation by Sefaria.org. Love their stuff. Highly recommend it if you want a dynamite library of Torah, of commentary, of Talmud, of everything online. I highly recommend Sefaria.org. Again, no money from the Safari people on this one, but I digest. So what's going on here? The first thing is, who's doing the commanding here? And this is listed among the 613 mitzvot, right? To light a menorah continuously, to have lamps lit day and night, is listed among the 613 mitzvot, right? So it's something God wants us to do. But God could have just said, acquire for yourselves special olive oil and light lamps. But instead, God starts with a tetzaveh. You command those people to get olive oil and light the lamp. And we'll get to the tamid here in a second, but I just wanted to pause here for a second. Is, speaking of delegation, right? Most of the time it's God doing the commanding around these parts, these parts meaning Torah. What does it mean that God is now delegating that power to command to Moses, right? God is handing over the reins, as it were. I mean, that's one interpretation. Some people might get upset with that, me saying it like that, but v'tetzaveh, like God's not the only one in the commanding business right now. God is actually telling Moses, and Moses is fulfilling God's will in this, so we know who's boss. But Moses is now transferring this commandment verb to Moses to tell the people what to do, right? So I'm done, for right now, I'm not going to command them, you command them, right? And if you command them, what message does that send? Right? They just got the 10 commandments from God, right? And they flipped out. They were like, too loud, can't stand it, head's going to explode. Moses, you go ask the rest and come tell us. And there are other places later where God continues to command stuff, right? So God's not out of the commanding business. But this is just sort of tipping a hand toward a future. I think the Yiddish for this is a Vorspeise, a little taste of what's to come. Not for nothing, this parsha is always read around the 7th of Adar, the month of Adar, which not only has Purim in it, but the 7th of Adar is also traditionally Moses' yahrzeit, right? So the rabbis who went back and counted all the days in the Torah and figured out when certain things happened, the day that Moses dies at the very end of the Torah, they figured was the 7th of Adar. right? So Moses, emulating God's ability to delegate, brings Aaron on the scene for the continuous operation of holy service and sets an example for delegation, sets an example for continuity, right? I've heard of other, people in the nonprofit world talk about founder syndrome. I think this is true in like Silicon Valley startups as well. The problem, with a lot of startup organizations is that they are so ingrained in the personality of the founder that they have succession problems, right? Nobody else is going to be able to lead the organization like the founder did with that much passion and that much vision. So the thing dies, or people are afraid it's going to, and then it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is true in corporate America. This is true in nonprofits, especially passion-driven organizations. And the people are actually really dependent on Moses at this point, right? I don't want to spoil it, but a few pages, Moses disappears for a while, and they try to start a new religion there for a second. So they need Moses. But what this is saying, and what it says to us every year when we read this, remembering that Moses passed away, is, wait a minute, Moses isn't here, right? The name isn't here. It's God saying to Moses, you're going to command them. Now, I picked this up, and I know that, I read the Torah before. I know that God is talking to Moses here. But what's on the page is Ve'ata, Tetzaveh. Right? It's as if to say, in that moment where you are remembering that Moses is absent because of his yahrzeit and also absent because his name isn't on the page, in that moment, the Torah speaks to you. Right? The Torah says, it is now your responsibility to make sure that the light never goes out. Right? And you can look at this as Jewish continuity, which is a big, conversation among Jewish professionals and Jewish institutions. Okay, oh no, Judaism's going to end. I doubt it, right? because we've seen worse, right? But I like to think of this more about the continuity of Jewish wisdom. Not just the Jewish line or the Jewish people, because I'm not worried about that. I am worried about the continuity of Torah, about the continuity of Jewish wisdom, not only in its study by Jewish people, but its light unto the world, right? Light over and over again in both the Torah, but especially in the rabbinic literature. Light, Torah ora, right? It's like light is Torah. Light is a metaphor for Torah. Light is the first thing that God creates, right? And so we have this lamp that's set up opposite the Mizbeach, opposite the altar. So, if you're looking in the holy space, on one side you've got the altar, on the other side you've got this seven-pronged lamp. And the lamp is to burn continuously. Now, the offerings have set times, and sometimes stuff is just left there to burn overnight. But the offering, there's a cycle or set times for offerings. You do it morning, you do it afternoon, you do it evening, let it burn. When you have holidays, you do a little more. But it's periodic, whereas it is a stock variable, if you will, for my mathematician friends out there. But the menorah is a flow variable. The menorah is continuous. The light is continuous. So it's on us, because the Torah says you, right? It's on, not just me, it's on you to keep that going. So that's kind of a big deal. That's kind of a big responsibility. It's also, the commentators get into this a little bit. They say it's worded in a way of a Tetzaveh, to make it clear, ner tamid, that this is a commandment for all time. Right. So far, we've done a lot of stuff to build this tent, right? We've done a lot of stuff to get the altar ready and to talk about sacrifices. And we're about to talk about the priesthood and how they're going to perform sacrifices. And one could conclude that just as the Mizbeach is only used when the people are making sacrifices in the tabernacle, or when people are making sacrifices in the temple, some hundreds of years hence, And now that we don't have a temple, we don't do sacrifices. If you're wondering, people like still ask this question today, like, you Jews still do animal sacrifice? The answer is no. I hear there's some Samaritans who are still up to this, but not us. We're not allowed to make sacrifices when we don't have a temple. But the commentators take pains to say you are still responsible in all generations for keeping lights on, right? For keeping a ner tamid burning continuously. This is why any synagogue that you go into, just about, like every synagogue that I've ever been to, unless it's like really rustic or just really, having a hard time keeping the lights on, has a ner tamid, has a light that burns continuously in the sanctuary. And many churches, many Christian churches that you go to have adopted this same feature of their architecture. They have this ner tamid, this light that never goes out. And this is where that comes from, right? This verse, Shmot, chapter 27, verse 20, right? That's the source of why every synagogue sanctuary you go into has a light that never goes out, right? Or many churches that you go to have a light that never goes out, because we read this and say, okay, there are days that we do sacrifices, there are appointed hours, there is a particular place where we have that kind of worship. But the light, we have a continuous responsibility for. And light doesn't discriminate, right? Right? Light doesn't discriminate by place or type of building. As long as there's nothing blocking it, light just emanates until it fades. Right? Light doesn't discriminate amongst people. If you turn on the light in the room, it doesn't shine on some people and not on others unless something is there to block them. And so this is actually pulling forward from the very creation of the world. The very first thing that God put in the universe in order to battle the chaos that was there was light. And that light continued. And now, emulating God, we are commanded to make a light of our own and to have that light never go out. So, in this week, where we dive into the meticulous descriptions of how to make garment. I'm not knocking it. Like, it may sound kind of dismissive of this just because I'm not like a Project Runway kind of guy. It's important, and we'll talk about more, especially maybe in the Jew Curious School. We'll talk about some of the linens and the garments and the breastplates and the anointing oil and stuff like that. But for here, I wanted to share with you this, I'll say, unique verse because it's a little bit removed from what the rest of the Parsha is about. It's also unique in that it is Moses is commanded to command, that first act of delegation that, again, not for nothing appears at a time where we're reminded that we're going to lose or have lost Moses, and that the responsibility devolves to us to keep this mitzvah continuously. So my blessing for you this week is that you find ways that you can illuminate other people's lives. There's so many times where we have the opportunity to shed light on a situation and we don't, because we think it's not our place. Now, there are times you should be quiet. Don't get me wrong. Like, stay off Twitter. That's just a bit of advice. But like, there are times when you can illuminate the situation. You may think it's not your place, but please, if you can shed light in someone's life, if you can shed light in a kind way that's helpful to them, I beg you to do so, because that is what God is giving to Moses, is giving to us in this week's Parsha. So I'm going to jump into the chat. I would love to hear from you if you have any questions about this or any other topic at all. Sorry, I've been kind of ranting there for a second. Let's see. Audio is working fine. We got some claps from Boca Raton, Florida. Olive oil was obviously very important, so much so that it is described in detail in the Parsha. Why isn't it used today for lighting candles? Why are some mitzvot while others are not? So, fun fact, some people still do use olive oil for their Ner Shel Shabbat, for their lights of Shabbat, and for their lights of Hanukkah, depending on where you are. And especially this is true in Israel, where it's easier to find oil lamps. And I think there are some refined versions of like grocery store olive oil that you can use. I've never tried this myself, again, because I've mostly had a house full of rambunctious children, and candles are just way safer and neater. You light a candle, candles burn themselves out in a very predictable way. And candles are more portable, things like that. But there are people who make the extra effort to light olive oil lights for Shabbat or olive oil lights for Hanukkah and for holidays and things like that. So it's not that we don't do it anymore. It's just that candles have kind of taken their place. So like if you're going to light, it just says the custom is to light 2 lights for Shabbat, say, or the appropriate number of Hanukkah candles, or excuse me, the appropriate number of Hanukkah lights. But it's a choice whether you want to use whether you want to use a particular refinement of olive oil or candles. It's just that candles are way easier, less likely to spill and catch your house on fire, that kind of thing. So I love this. Vows thrown every day, no matter how small, a good deed should be done. This is continuous light. I love this. Shareable light, shareable goodness. I love how people are seeing this being applied to their own lives. And so, listen, that's all I have to teach for this lesson. I really appreciate everybody learning with me today. Just throw in a quick plug before I move on. The Jew Curious School every week has a live weekly Parsha study class. It's a little bit like this, only it's more of a closed group. It's more interactive. The live stream is a little bit better. But we do this every week. The live class is Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, for members of the Jew Curious School. So if you like this kind of Torah learning together, I also bring, in that context, I bring a little bit more text. I have a shareable text sheet where we'll look at the Torah, we'll look at the Talmud on it, we'll look at the commentaries on it. It goes just into more depth, but I wanted to go ahead and share this with you in this way, and I really appreciate everybody learning with me. If you want to know more about how to get involved with the Jew Curious School, just go to rabbijohncarrier.com/school, and you'll get all the info you need. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me through Facebook, through YouTube, however you want to reach out to me. Happy to answer what questions you have. So thank you again, everybody, for learning with me. And until next time, peace.